This woke mind virus, how did it start? Was it bats? Was it a escape from a lab? I mean...
The mainstream media would have us believe that the verdict is in. Elon Musk is deplorable. He's a menace. But in this video, I want to convince you that, on the level that matters most, Musk is as religiously woke as Robin DiAngelo. It's a contrarian opinion, I know. Since he purchased Twitter, made it his personal playground, and changed its name to X, there's been a massive uptick in reported hate speech on the platform. As early as December of 2022, only about a month after Musk took over, the New York Times reported problematic content and formerly barred accounts have increased sharply in the short time since Elon Musk took over. And last year, Musk sued the nonprofit Center for Countering Digital Hate, an organization with ties to the UK Labour Party, after the organization reported that slurs and epithets had doubled on the platform since Musk started running the company. However, despite these reports, and contrary to Musk's own self-assessment, Elon Musk is woke. He's woke in the sense that his ideas and aims have been shaped by the same religious awakenings that, according to Sublation author Jack Ross in his book, The Strange Death of American Exceptionalism, shaped America's political history and has led to this moment wherein America's religiosity has all but totally collapsed into wokeness on one side and into a prosperity gospel insisting on maintaining a reactionary form of greatness on the other. To say it more clearly, Elon Musk is woke because his dreams, visions, and political aims consist of variations on ideas and tropes that sprang out of the Fourth Awakening.
It's cyberpunk. Now you know, everybody in the world knows there have been 3 countercultures in America and the world in the last 20, 30 years. We had the beatniks and William Burroughs, we had the hippies with rock and roll, and now we have the cyberpunk, the counterculture of the electronic age.
I'm a hope seller, but my hope is scientific hope. It's based upon projections from NASA, and all my books are based upon scientific facts which give hope.
In Jack Ross's upcoming book, The Strange Death of American Exceptionalism, Ross reminds readers that changes in America's ideological understanding of itself move through moments defined by creedal passions. In Samuel Huntington's book, American Politics, A Promise of Disharmony, Huntington outlined 4 periods wherein a creedal passion overtook and changed America's self-conception. In the 1770s, the Revolutionary era was defined by a moralistic reform movement, and this creedal passion culminated in the American Revolution. The 1960s were defined by social and political reform movements aimed at overturning the status quo, achieving equality for minorities and women, and protesting the Vietnam War. And according to Jack Ross, a major movement for societal change occurred in the second decade of the 21st century as well. It was aimed at establishing an intersectional creed best understood as an extension of the practice of reevaluation counseling devised by the one-time Communist Party member and one-time practitioner of Scientology, Harvey Jackins. It was his reevaluation counseling techniques that informed Robin DiAngelo's approach to combating racism, as DiAngelo was a member of the international reevaluation counseling communities in the late 90s. Jackins' counseling method is aimed at discharging what he called distress. In his book, The Human Situation, Jackins described distress this way. Distress is a result of the failure of the discharge process to operate. It is the accumulation of the undischarged recordings of past hurts. It is the stored, rigid pattern of the past hurt, and it is the stored, rigid pattern of the unsuccessful attempt to discharge the hurt. While intersectionality was originally a legal theory aimed at collecting damages for Black women who've been harmed by racist and sexist employment practices, the intersectional ideology that arose in the second decade of the 21st century is best understood not as a legal remedy for grievances, but as a religious expression of identity achieved through the discharge of this distress.
what is racism? What is it? What does it mean for you? I can't name racism for you because I'm going to navigate it and I'm going to look at it and define it based on my learned experiences, unique to my identity and acquired learning. And what is that? My experiences, trauma, messaging, and how I've interpreted and more.
It is, according to Ross, a remnant of the Protestant religion. It is what happened to Puritanism after what the author Philip Reif described as a triumph of the therapeutic over Christianity.
I talk in the book about the decline of religiosity, and I describe specifically the ways that can be related to the same impact of Vietnam. And
let's talk a little bit about the death of God in American politics, and because I'm unsure. It sounds like Donald Trump represented the kind of the death of God on the right. Would that be correct?
Yeah, it's very.
Yeah, and whereas on the left, that had happened after Vietnam. There was actually literally a death of God theological movement that I think was largely Protestant.
Yeah, and was basically the height of Cold War liberalism, mostly pre-Vietnam, or at least when it really broke out more the first half of the 60s. And that was basically an idea which, again, had echoes of the so-called social gospel that was closely associated with prohibition about political action to build the kingdom of God. And basically, the whole death of God theology was basically taking distinctive theology more or less out of it.
Rather than seeking redemption, in the late 90s, Protestants sought treatment. Likewise, given the death of politics after 1968, those who would seek to change life were directed to a counseling session. According to Huntington, periods of creedal passion are preceded by religious awakenings. The first Great Awakening in Britain and the North American colonies arrived in the 1730s when evangelicalism emerged as a reaction to the secular threat inherent to the rational Christianity of characters like Christian Wolff and the deist John Locke. The Fourth Great Awakening is said to have occurred either directly after World War II or in the 60s and 70s. But for our purposes, we'll count what Will Herberg described in his book, Protestant Catholic Jew, as a perplexing religious revival, perplexing in its shallowness primarily, as a Great Awakening, and note how this period split Protestantism. On the one side, there was the death of God theology and the move to replace Christian doctrine with a social mission aligned with the civil rights movement. And on the other side, there was the fundamentalist evangelicalism of Billy Graham, whose revival of Christianity was also aligned with the black struggle.
God is dead. I mean that the transcendent Lord, the sovereign God, who is revealed in the Old Testament, in the Bible, if you will, the God who is confessed in the Christian tradition, that this God is no longer present, is no longer manifest, is no longer real. And furthermore, I intend to say not that this God is simply missing, not that this God is an eclipse, but rather that this God is dead.
About 2 or 3 years ago, I had the privilege of having an interview with Chancellor Konrad Adenauer in his last year in office as Chancellor of Germany. He had invited me. I was preaching in Germany, and he had invited me to come and see him, and I didn't know what about. I was quite surprised and, of course, flattered to get the invitation. And I went. He greeted me. Big, tall, giant of a man. The man that had almost single-handedly brought democracy back to Germany after the war. And I wondered, what does this great man want of me? The first question he asked me was this. He said, do you believe in life after death? I said, yes, sir, I do. I said, I believe the Bible teaches it. He said, I do too. He said, I am studying the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And he said, when I leave office as chancellor, I intend to spend the rest of my life studying the resurrection of Christ. Because he said, if Christ is alive, there is hope in the world. He said, if Christ is not alive, there is no hope that I can see that civilization can be saved.
Through all the awakenings, however, there was one constant: the struggle with secularism and an attempt to modernize the tradition, to keep up with the times. And while Billy Graham was starting his ministry on the radio in the 1950s, the French Jesuit named Pierre Teilhard de Chardin was working on understanding his Catholic faith through science.
Dr. Niebuhr, does the concept of a scientific morality make any sense?
Unlike Graham, who preached the Bible as a literal word of God in ways that made other conservative Protestants such as Reinhold Niebuhr wince, de Chardin preached a doctrine of godly evolution and progress.
So if I were to ask whether anthropology, whether psychology, whether any other branch of science has clarified our moral life, how would you answer it?
I would answer just in that way. Of course,
Yeah.
In regard to psychiatry, quite obviously, a matter of inner is clarified a great deal in regard to this matter of inner honesty.
De Chardin's theology was a poor man's version of Hegelian idealism, as he argued that God was developing, or that humanity was developing towards God. As the conservative journalist Ross Douthat put it in his book, Bad Religion, his admirers interpreted them as divinizing science and technology, capitalism and globalization. These were all signs of humanity's progress toward the second coming of Christ, which was implicitly redefined to mean the moment when God, mankind, and the cosmos all merged into one universal consciousness. There was no room for a fall of man in this narrative, and no original sin, just the steady upward ascent of an ever-improving, ever-evolving species, converging toward the omega point of unity and harmony with every passing year. It seems to me that you can find echoes of this idea of an omega point in humanity's future throughout what became of American spirituality in the years after de Chardin. For instance, it's there in the background of the works of the psychedelic guru Terence McKenna, who claimed something like the omega point would arrive in 2012, when what he called maximum novelty would be achieved.
When we reach the eschaton, we will discover we are the eschaton. There will be no sense of there'll no handshake exactly. When we reach it, we will discover we are it. So our aspirations toward good and evil and all this, everything is just going to be exacerbated to an excruciating level of intensity. And, you know, people all around you will be converting to cults, taking drugs, piercing themselves, having transsexual operations, religious experiences, inheriting money, losing money, getting diseases, getting cured, having channeling experiences, just endless, this stuff. And until we reach, and then there will become, as when you break through the sound barrier or something, in 2012, I think, it's like, wow.
Quickly, let's walk through Teilhard's theory. The universe has three levels: the physical level of pre-living matter, biological level as found on the biosphere of Earth, and the noosphere, where self-reflective life organizes itself in more and more complex ways. The omega point, then, will be the moment when absolute complexity is reached and the universe experiences the birth of God.
Everything will be automatic. I mean, there'll be household robots that you can fully talk to as though they're people. We won't have universal basic income. We'll have universal high income. So in some sense, it'll be somewhat of a leveler or an equalizer, because really, I think everyone will have access to this magic genie. and you're able to ask any question. It'll certainly be good for education. It'll be the best tutor you could, and the most patient tutor. And there will be no shortage of goods and services. It will be an age of abundance.
And the Lord has declared this day that you are his people, his treasured possession as he promised, and that you are to keep all his commands. He has declared that he will set you in praise, fame and honor high above all the nations he has made, and that you will be a people holy to the Lord your God, as he promised.
What Jack Ross and Samuel Huntington would have us believe is that the transformation of religion is itself a reaction to social and political reality. These awakenings and the creedal passions or political movements that follow after them are attempts by theologians, ministers, and activists, including ministers like Robin DiAngelo and Ta-Nehisi Coates, to adjust to the pressures and contradictions within our society. At the moment, the religious sensibility of America appears to be split in two, with a red and a blue side. The blue side promises salvation through a performative and therapeutic expression of distress, mediated by hierarchically organized systems defined by various historical traumas and oppressions, while the red side promises salvation both through a return to American-style technological progress and through an embrace of an ecumenical faith.
You've said that you're against secularism. So which religion should rule us all?
None. That is the answer.
Well, isn't that secularism?
That's not secularism. I think that capital S secularism is something that has used a substitute religious-like worldview to foist that affirmatively onto multiple institutions across this country.
What we should notice now, and what we will explore in future videos, is that both sides in the ongoing religious war in America are struggling with the same contradiction, are facing the same problem, namely, both the woke intersectional progressive Puritans and the right-wing evangelicals and Catholics are struggling with nihilism. They are also struggling with the cognitive dissonance that emerges as the people realize that the ideals of America are dramatically out of sync with the reality of American life. This cognitive dissonance is said to invoke a religious reaction, even after the death of God. Today it has inspired both a great awakening in the style of Robin DiAngelo, a striving after a therapeutic solution to the inequities in society, with the utopian aim of resolving these inequities and the nihilistic alienation that plagues society through a well-managed discharge of distress. But it has also inspired a return of the dream of the noosphere and the dream of techno-political solutions, which themselves aim at giving birth to God. Karl Marx once said that religion is the opium of the masses. He meant that religion was an analgesic that relieved the pain of the social disorders generated through and by capitalism. With this in mind, it is impossible to avoid the conclusion that so far, given the degree to which our politics has been led by religious sentiment, even after the death of God, the history of American politics is the history of a heavily sedated population, a politics led by both resentment and fever dreams.